It is with a peculiar mixture of nostalgia and dread that I recount the brief yet unforgettable acquaintance I once had with Dr. Alistair Kensington, a man whose intellect was as boundless as the abyss and whose eccentricities were the stuff of whispered legend. It was in the winter of 1893, when I was but a young scholar, newly graduated from Oxford, that I first encountered this enigmatic figure. The meeting occurred, quite by accident, in a dimly lit corner of the Bodleian Library, where the doctor was poring over some obscure volume with the intensity of one engaged in a matter of life and death. Dr. Kensington was a man of advanced years, with a gaunt, almost skeletal frame that seemed scarcely capable of supporting the weight of his vast intellect. His hair, once a raven black, had turned an iron grey, and his sharp, aquiline features bore the marks of both time and countless sleepless nights spent in pursuit of knowledge that most would deem forbidden. His eyes, however, were his most striking feature. Piercing, almost predatory, they seemed to gaze not merely at the world around him, but through it, as though perceiving some hidden reality beyond the veil of the mundane. I had heard of Dr. Kensington long before I ever laid eyes on him. His reputation as a scholar of unparalleled genius was known throughout the academic world, though his name was seldom spoken aloud, and always in hushed tones. Rumours abounded concerning his work, whispers of strange experiments conducted in the dead of night, of tomes filled with blasphemous secrets hidden away in the darkest recesses of the library, of a mind that had delved too deeply into the mysteries of the cosmos. It was said that Kensington had once been a man of more conventional interests, a promising young academic who had quickly risen through the ranks of the university. But something had changed. Some event, some revelation, had driven him to the edge of sanity, and he had emerged from that abyss a changed man. The precise nature of this transformation was unknown, though it was widely believed that it had something to do with his studies in metaphysics and the occult. The doctor looked up from his book as I approached, fixing me with that unsettling gaze that seemed to see straight into my soul. For a moment I hesitated, unsure whether I should continue, but something compelled me to press on. After all, this was Dr. Alistair Kensington, a man whose intellect and knowledge were unmatched. To pass up the opportunity to speak with him would have been unthinkable. "Good evening, sir," I began, my voice betraying a slight tremor. "I hope I am not intruding." Kensington regarded me for a moment, his expression inscrutable. Then, to my surprise, he smiled, a thin, almost imperceptible smile, but a smile nonetheless. "Not at all," he replied, his voice low and gravelly, like the rustle of ancient parchment. "It is rare that I am disturbed in this place, and rarer still that the disturbance is of a pleasant nature. Please, sit." I did as he asked, taking a seat opposite him at the small, candle-lit table. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I could feel the weight of his gaze upon me, and I could not help but feel as though I were being scrutinized, judged in some way that I could not quite comprehend. "You are a student of the occult, are you not?" Kensington asked suddenly, his tone more a statement than a question. I nodded, somewhat taken aback by the directness of his inquiry. "Yes, I have a particular interest in the esoteric and the arcane," I replied, trying to maintain a calm and collected demeanour, "though I must admit my knowledge is but a drop in the ocean compared to your own." Kensington chuckled softly, though there was no warmth in the sound. "Knowledge, young man, is a double-edged sword. The more one knows, the more one realizes how little one truly understands. There are forces at work in this world, forces beyond our comprehension, beyond our control. To seek out such knowledge is to court madness." His words sent a chill down my spine, and I suddenly found myself questioning the wisdom of my own pursuits. But I was also intrigued, drawn in by the enigmatic nature of the man before me. Here was someone who had delved deeper into the mysteries of the universe than anyone else, and I could not resist the temptation to learn more. "What sort of forces do you speak of?" I asked. Kensington's expression darkened, and for a moment I thought he might refuse to answer. But then, after what seemed an eternity, he spoke. "There are things in this world, things that exist beyond the veil of our reality, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Things that have been forgotten by all but a few, and yet they are still there, lurking in the shadows, waiting to be called forth. They are the ancient ones, the old gods, whose names have been lost to time, but whose power still lingers. He leaned in closer, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made me feel as though I was standing on the edge of an abyss. I have seen them, he continued, his voice trembling with a mixture of awe and terror. I have glimpsed their world, a world that exists alongside our own, and it is a place of unimaginable horror. It is a place where the laws of nature do not apply, where time and space are meaningless, and where the very fabric of reality is twisted and distorted. I was speechless, overwhelmed by the sheer enormity of what he was saying, but even as I struggled to process his words, a part of me could not help but wonder if it was all some elaborate fantasy, a product of a mind that had been pushed too far. "Are you saying that these things are real?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Kensington nodded slowly, his expression grave. "They are as real as you or I," he said, "but they do not exist in our world, at least not in the way we understand it. They exist in the spaces between, in the dark corners of our reality where the light of reason does not reach, and they are always watching, always waiting." The silence that followed was oppressive, as though the very air around us had grown heavy with the weight of his words. I could feel a sense of dread creeping into my mind, a gnawing fear that I had unwittingly stumbled upon something far greater, far more dangerous than I could ever have imagined. I wanted to ask more, to probe deeper into the mysteries that Kensington had alluded to, but a sudden, inexplicable terror seized me. I could feel the walls of the library closing in, the shadows lengthening, and I knew that I had to leave. I could not bear to hear any more. "Thank you for your time, Dr. Kensington," I said, rising from my seat, "but I'm afraid I must go." Kensington did not seem surprised. He simply nodded, a look of understanding in his eyes. "Be careful, young man," he said as I turned to leave. "Some doors, once opened, cannot be closed." I fled the library that night, and though I tried to forget the encounter, the memory of Dr. Alistair Kensington and his terrible revelations haunted me for years to come. I avoided the occult from that day forward, though it seemed to pursue me with a relentless persistence, appearing in the books I read, the lectures I attended, even the conversations I overheard. It was only years later, long after Kensington had passed away under mysterious circumstances, that I realized the true significance of our meeting. For though I had tried to escape it, I had already been marked by the knowledge he had shared with me. And as I write this, I can feel their eyes upon me once more, those ancient beings that lurk in the shadows, waiting for the day when they will be called forth once again. And when that day comes, I fear that I too will be unable to close the door that I once so foolishly opened.